Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick MAdvertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, marketing, content, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have David Herrmann. He is the president of Herrmann Digital LLC. He's a wonderful voice of advertising and technology online. I've read his thoughts for years on the industry. You've probably seen David before online. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And, David, you have a lot of different comments and content online. But before I get into sort of some of the more grandiose questions around macro trends or anything like that, one of your favorite comments that I read online was, and I wrote this down, I had to go all the way back to 2021, but you had a tweet that said, "Your creative will win you clicks. Your website will win you the sale, but your customer service will make or break your company." And I absolutely love that quote. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that thinking, if only because I feel like it's still not quite understood?
Yeah, I mean, I work with mostly direct consumer brands that are primarily, running ads on the social channels. And more we'll see brands that will just completely ignore their comment sections, and they'll completely ignore negative emails and negative feedback that happens on things like Reddit. And more what we see is the brands that I run that are quote unquote winning are the ones that are not afraid to get into the comment sections, not afraid to jump on Reddit and almost kind of like respond back to either the haters or the negativity. And a lot of times the customers react very positively to that. And more and more, especially with a lot of the drop shippers that are out there that aren't doing any of that, the brands that are standing out are the ones that are just being very upfront about it. In fact, one of the best ad units that we run is literally negative reviews from customers, and we have fun with it. And that always is one of the most positive things that brands I've seen have done is run. It's almost like this reverse psychology a little bit of why are you showing the negative reviews? Well, we're just upfront about it. So that seems to be the case that I see anyway.
Yeah, I think it's extraordinary. I love, by the way, the small brand or the, restaurant that knows it's really good running that one bad review from kind of a crazy person and kind of winking at it, right? And then your core customers are like, that obviously isn't true. And it creates some good conversation. So it's definitely a way to stand out. One thing, though, that's extraordinary to me about that tweet in particular is I find that there's almost this trend of, as companies get larger, the customer service gets worse. And so you see this true, not just with classic consumer tech, and electronics, but actually with, the $1 trillion internet companies, where it's basically impossible to get customer support for, even if you're doing something like running Google ads or Facebook ads where you want to give them money, they make it really difficult to get service. And this is extraordinary to me because if you look back to the early days of Amazon, for instance, Jeff Bezos was responding to individuals, Steve Jobs was responding to people, and their leadership was so tuned in and really cared. And it almost feels to me, and I'm not going to say too much more because I worked in-house at a large company and I don't want to say too many annoying things that I haven't already said, but I feel as if, it almost gets to management consultant mindset where it's well, just do the thing that it requires the least amount on our end and, doesn't use our team cycles. And ultimately it just kind of makes people not like you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I experience it obviously quite a bit with the tech companies more than anything as a consumer of these products. But of all the brands I work with, we look at the NPS scores all the time of what's the quality of the customer? What are they saying back to us? And we react. I mean, that alone plays such an important factor in, the ads you run, the quality of how you're viewed by these platforms as well. And, whenever we'll see like our quote unquote net score drop, we will notice our CAC will always be going up as a result. Like we're always like, oh, when you look at everything else, you're like, go to the NPS score. Did that change? Did your feedback on the Facebook ad change on the back end? Like that stuff matters so much more now when these platforms are just looking for more ways to kind of like punish you in the auction. They're just consistently looking at that. So to me, it's such a odd thing to even ignore that. Like, drop shipping, for example, I'll kind of pick on those kind of guys is like, they don't care, right? It is what it is. And that's why that stuff's kind of like a flash in the pan, and then they move on to the next product, the next product, the next product. So try not to be a drop shipper, essentially.
Yeah, that's like a whole other category, which unfortunately does get lumped in with marketers. Like people, there's the make money online people, which they get lumped in with marketers. Just like sometimes all of the like kind of chat room traders can be mistaken for like actual people doing real investment work, right? So it's kind of a similar phenomenon.
Yep, I feel that.
So David, before we get into more questions, I just want to set the stage a little bit for you more. I have a bunch of notes on things you said online. I really like that quote. Do you want to give just like the 1-minute overview into your shop and how you guys approach digital? Because I think that'll be really interesting and set up some of the answers for the next questions even better.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for about 17 years now. I was one of the early stage, doing media buying through Google back in the early 2000s. 2005 is when I got my started, and moved over to the paid social side in around 2010, 2011, and been pretty much only exclusively working in all the paid social channels. Our approach is twofold. One is we like to work with, early stage brands that are just trying to get their footing, to really figure out what their voice is. It's a big area for us that we really like to focus on. Secondary, we work with brands that have already kind of grown outside of sort of their in-house teams. Those brands that are, starting to get into the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 range and up. We work with them to really kind of scale them to the next level. And that's kind of really been where our bread and butter has been over the past 4 or 5 years, has been working with those brands. And what makes it special is, a lot of these channels, specifically Facebook, to use here, there's a formula in how to do it. And, especially now more than ever with the way that these tools are moving into black box, you have to kind of always seem to fight back at the channels and what they're trying to do. And when you have visibility across a lot of brands and a lot of channels, you start to see some trends, and being able to kind of partake across the board and going like, hey, this brand's seeing this on this day, this brand's seeing this on this day. Okay, there's something here. Let's pull back in other channels, or let's pull back on this placement or this age or whatever it may be, and be able to kind of utilize that across the board. And I think that's something that's been really beneficial for the brands that we work with. And we're very careful with the brands we work with. We like to work with brands that we like the actual products of. For us, that's like kind of our biggest thing. If we can't be excited to work with the brand, generally it's not going to work, because it's just like, it just feels like a job. So for us, it's never a job. It's actually, we all love doing this every day. So it's a whole different vibe.
That's awesome. I love that answer. And I think as an agency, sort of being a little bit choosy with your clients, I think probably makes for a much happier team than the shop that takes those kind of, really annoying clients where you're even doing a great job and they're still never happy, right? Like those are the worst.
And I'm very fortunate. I've been in this industry a long time and been able to kind of build a path with that, of having the right network of people. And that's been a benefit to be able to do that. But, it's interesting is we're seeing it more and more, especially this year with kind of the economy where it's at. The brands that are really kind of standing out are the ones that are willing to open their wallet and test different theories and different ideas than just the standard playbook. That's been one thing that, has really stood the test of time is, hey, like, let's jump on something different or something new. And when everyone's zigging, we try to zag a little bit to drive top of funnel in a different spot than like a Meta or a YouTube or things like that. So that's been something that's been fun.
So let's talk startups before we talk big company stuff, because you work on both. I think the startup part is more fun. The big company stuff is wonky. For startups, especially because we have a lot of young founders listening, what do you think are some mistakes when you're a startup, you don't have much online traction, but you're going to market with, your new SaaS tool or your new D2C product? What are some of the main mistakes you see startups make when they first start to turn on acquisition?
Number one, try to be everywhere. I think that's the big one. Oftentimes we'll see like, hey, yeah, we saw TikTok's working. We're going to do Meta. We're going to do Google. Doesn't Pinterest work? Let's try LinkedIn. And you're like, guys, like, let's master one and nail it before we move to another. And that to me is the number one thing that throws off so many like startups and younger brands, is just trying to be everywhere all at once. Second is not going forward with a cohesive message. That's a huge one I see, is like, you'll have like 5 different taglines and all these different brand assets that look nothing alike. And for early stage, you are trying to figure it out, but it's important to kind of sort of put everything behind something that feels like it can be like different taglines, but in the same world. Like, don't get super scattered on all this stuff. Cause like we'll come across brands where we'll have assets from 5 different agencies and nothing will look cohesive. You're like, no one's going to know or remember anything about you because you're in all these different spots, Yeah.
So that's like, is it even the same company?
Right. Exactly. And with SaaS, I've seen it even more. Like, it's like, you'll get people that'll be like, wait, what do you do? And I worked with a SaaS brand for a little bit where that was like, everyone knew the brand name, but no one knew what they did. It's kind of like Oracle. Like, what do they do? Or Salesforce?
Yeah.
It's like, what
or
is
Palantir now is the new one where people
it's you just want to be like, you want to be known, especially in SaaS, like for that one thing and be known for it well. And there's a lot of examples out there of brands that launched well. One that I can think of is like Triple Whale, like that attribution software. Like, they came out of the gate and just like, they were really like, their branding was great. Like, they really nailed what they were trying to do. I haven't heard from them much lately, but like out of the gate, like they stole market share immediately. That was powerful.
We had Alexa from Triple Whale on the podcast, and she is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I think that team is now at another company, but they're a great company still as well.
Yeah.
By the way, in regards to what does Salesforce do, I'm giving Salesforce a million bows and arrows for not creating a fun video leaning into it. And like, they should just make a joke about it. They should be self-aware and do something fun. And I bet if they do that right, it's not even about going viral. It's just like create like a cool industry conversation that no one knows what we do.
Well, like the thing that I would do is I would play up the whole, like, having the largest building in San Francisco. Why are we called like, why is this building here? Is it called Salesforce? And like, just kind of play it up. Because it's just, I mean, when you go into the Bay, right? I mean, you used to live there, right? You see it, like, it's the thing that sticks out the most. And what the heck is Salesforce? Well, it's not just a building in downtown San Francisco. It's something more. So that would be kind of fun.
Yeah, there needs to be, I think there needs to be more whimsy from large companies, but not in a, as the kids say, cringe way. In a, like, I think the problem is a lot of times the marketers aren't like really a part of the industry conversations. And that's kind of sad. I even feel like for a lot of companies, and I'm not even just talking about online, there are certain brands where you go to the events, the in-person events of that industry, and like the brand is just never there, right? And it's kind of emblematic of they live in their little ivory tower in their bubble. And I think that was fine for a while, but actually that's going to lead into my next questions are around AI, because I think AI is going to change a lot of things. A lot of people have gotten very comfortable. And I think like one piece of good news with AI is it might force a bunch of people that have done something one way forever to like rethink and start to be better. some of the big tech names come to mind. But I want to ask, I guess, more simply as relates to all of our jobs as advertising creatives. Do you have a take on AI here, where it's useful, how we should use Gen AI, any broad thoughts, whatever, there's lots of parts of that question, so you can take it whatever direction you want.
My general early thoughts on AI, at least from my perspective, have been right now, the best uses of AI is kind of using it for data analysis more than anything. I find that utilizing like marketing messaging, getting and building static images and things like that has been kind of underwhelming to start because it's utilizing other things and the creativity just doesn't seem to be there. But for me, what I've found it most useful for is either taking a winning combination of an image, a copy, and just saying like, hey, can you help me come up with new ideas off of this? And it's not so much that I use those ideas. It helps me and my brain be able to go, oh, actually, no, now I know where I'm going to go with this, right? It's a branching off point. But the data analysis for me, especially because I have a guy that works for me that's all he does all day. Like him and I, basically, it's sped his job up so much faster, but he still has to use his own brain to interpret the data as best as we can, because I don't think AI is fully there yet because it doesn't understand context, right? So the context behind each brand is going to be so different. So just being able to sparse that data that normally would take, 30 minutes to an hour can now take, 5 minutes or less and spend more time actually analyzing. So I think that's where AI has been useful. But in terms of what I'm noticing has been just in the general software, right? We've seen it really injected in everything. And where the two negatives with that are, one is I feel like a lot of these products are kind of being rushed to market, and there doesn't really seem to be a point of some of them. Like, wait, why are we adding that just to increase the memory on our computer? Like, I don't understand why we're adding that. Meta is kind of a primary one. I'll probably mention them a lot just because I spend so much time on it. But it's like they keep adding new features that actually have a negative effect. So like they will add things like, they'll automatically inject the promo code. Well, I don't want to inject a promo code, but then they'll just do it anyway, and your things like that. Or, hey, we automatically found this promo code on your site, we're going to add it to the thing. No, don't do that. And so I think that's where it's still not really helpful, has been on that stuff. It's just this automatic thing because it worked for one brand, so therefore it should work for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said, because I think tech and also Facebook have such a bias to say, okay, something is new and new equals good. And so you saw that perhaps with their huge bet on the metaverse, quote unquote. Like, I actually think VR is pretty cool, but the metaverse as a concept is weird, right? Like and then they were trying to latch on to, the NFT craze and all this stuff. And it just kind of was this amalgamation of ideas, and none of it really made any sense. And there's people sitting in a conference room in space. And I'm like, I just want to play games with my friends. Like, what is all of this? And so it seems like with, I actually do appreciate, Facebook building open source AI. I think that's super cool. But a lot of their other initiatives, like, you said, them injecting AI into things where you're like, wait, what is this doing for me? I think this is like such Silicon Valley to have some engineers in a room be like, well, what can we do, instead of asking a user, well, what do we want?
Yeah, no, it that's what it feels like to me, and it's like, the other day I came across, I forget what tool it was, but it was asking, like, I was putting in the input for what I wanted. It was actually, I think it was in Canva. Where it was like, it was basically suggesting something to me, but the suggestion was like overruling what I was putting in.
Wow.
And I was like, this is just annoying now. I'm just annoyed. Like, I'm going to leave, and I just think, I know that Mark Zuckerberg at the Q2 earnings call basically said that, he expects marketers that we're just going to input the budget and the timeline of when we want this to run. Meta will take care of the rest. And that kind of like is an interesting quote, because I think in theory, that's what these tech companies want, but in practice, that's not going to be reality because nobody can agree on almost anything. And I think they're going to have a really tough time for buying, especially with the larger brands for that. So it's going to be really interesting.
That actually brings up an interesting question. I think you'll have an opinion on. You could say it depends. It's okay. What percent of Facebook and Google, Twitter doesn't even have them, but Facebook and Google's like auto recommended, recommendations should you apply? Like if I'm a newbie marketer or busy, should I just go in and just wholesale say yes? Are there ML tools that good? Should I just read them first and kind of figure it out? Like what do you guys do? Like what's your
I don't look at 99% of those. And I advise brands that are to just think about what they're doing because, sure, in theory, you could probably click all of them and just not touch something for 14 days and eventually it'll figure it out. The issue is that it doesn't help you in the long run because it doesn't help you understand like the tools you need to do in practice to be successful. And they want you just to input your budget and do that. But, these tools have bugs, a lot of bugs, and those bugs get exasperated when you continue to listen to certain things because, if you lean in on something, I'll give you an example. I work with a brand that their ad account completely just broke, as in like the bidding got completely thrown off. And in theory, it looked great. Your CTRs were triple what they normally were. Your cost per click dropped by 100%. Like you should be printing money because your ads are taking off. Well, in reality, the meta auction was broken. It was serving bids where the customer was so net new, it was so top of funnel for a conversion campaign that it kind of threw things off. And so, you're kind of in a little bit of a difficult path there because you're like, well, where do you go with that? And it's like, we just like, you know what? Like something just seems off here because we're not getting any conversions from this and we're running conversion campaigns for a brand that has been around for a long time. So we basically just built a new ad account and launched it again and everything returned to normal. And it was just something got messed up somehow. And, if you just listen to the recommendations for these tools, you would probably be running that and trying to figure out I don't have a clue what's going on. But because, we have sophisticated people looking at this every single day and going like, that looks, something's off. Right. And that's where I think we're going to run into problems with the future of this stuff and getting super black box is there's going to be nobody that's going to really tell you what's broken. And there's no way for you to know. And so you're either going to just shut the ads off entirely and hope that in a month it's better, or you're going to do something else. Who knows? But I think that's where the scary part of this is machines are inherently not always accurate and they don't always know what's right. And they're only learning what is based on the previous data that they were given. So, it'll get better as we go, but yeah, that's, I think where the problem is.
Yeah. I think they, at least on the engine product side, envision a world where their suggestions are like the SMP, where it's like, look, we're going to give you the standard performance. But I think even they would acknowledge that, if you've been to like the Facebook and Google events, even they have the power users that are there that they're like, oh, you're better than our machines, can be. But I think in their head, they're trying to give suggestions for like an SMB where, okay, like our ML tools and our auto recommendations are going to be better than like some mom and pop. And by the way, they're pretty busy. So I think like they do optimize for efficiency too. Like, okay, get in here real quick, have a good experience, click next a bunch of times and be done with it, versus you being a professional and, understand, actually having read all of the documentation and, build things with their APIs and stuff like that. Like you understand so much deeper than just someone selling, blue suede shoes.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's true. But I think where the issue with that is a lot of these people are going to conferences and then they start talking to somebody else and like, well, yeah, my guy is crushing it. And they're like, well, like it always comes back to people talk. And if you're not getting the same return on ad spend that somebody else is, even though if you're not even in the same business, you go, well, I should get that, and it's like, right. I think that's where where I think a lot of these software companies will run into problems, because if you go online and just type in like Google suggestions, right, or anything around like Google's automated suggestions for ads, it's just ridiculed everywhere. And so people just read it and go, I don't know if I want to do that, right?
So I've kind of a crossover question for you. I had it written another way, but you're so smart. I want to ask it this way, because I think this will be interesting for not just our listeners, but the wider conversation that's happening in tech right now. There's a lot going on in the EU right now with regards to trying to regulate AI. And they actually think like there's existential risks, like, the robots are going to come attack us. This is what they seriously think. But anyway, I guess, do you have any words regarding what you've seen Europe do just with ad tech regulation and how that might apply to the AI industry? If you have any words for the AI industry people, or even just ad tech and AI, or ad tech and privacy in general, and what Europe is doing.
Yeah. It feels like to me that Europe is trying to stifle any innovation whatsoever. And I mean, we used to run a lot of brands ads in the EU, and we stopped. We're just like, no, because there's so much regulation that it's impossible, unless you're local, for you to really know what's going on. And you just like the great teams that do what we do are all just choosing to stay out and moving their budgets somewhere else. And the same goes for like, other channels. It's like, we don't know what's what. And so brands are also afraid to run ads. Brands are afraid to do certain things. And I imagine with AI as well, they're going to see a point where they're going to be so far behind the 8 ball and everything else that it's going to hurt them in the long run. And I think that AI is something that needs to be monitored, and it's something that there needs to be some type of, I don't know, like an ad, like a board, I don't know, like a board or something. I don't even know if that sounds right, but like there should be something where it's like, hey, we need to regulate it in some aspects in case this thing gets too out of whack. I don't listen to everything Elon says, but I've always appreciated that he's kind of talked about there might be, there's something here. And I'm like, I know he's very much like extreme case, but there, I just go, look, I grew up with Terminator, right? So it's like, there's a little bit of me in the back of like, yeah, Terminator 2 is pretty, I don't know, there's something here, so I don't know. Like, I would also assume that like the open AI and all these kind of guys are at least thinking about some of that, I'd hope, versus profit versus, having some guardrails in place. But in regards to the EU, at least from my marketing perspective, like, we're just sitting out. We're just choosing not to go. We'll go to Australia. We'll do Australia, New Zealand before we'll go to EU. EU is like the last we'll go to. We're doing Japan, Korea, Asia, but EU is just getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah, I've dunked on the EU D-cells, we call them, and they've also made interesting like macro energy policy choices, like shutting down nuclear in Germany. It's like some weird stuff is going on over there. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it definitely feels like there's a group that's just trying to stifle everything, and I kind of get where they're coming from, but at the same time, I don't get where they're coming from, especially with like this ridicule towards the privacy stuff, because I mean, it does feel, at least from the US perspective, that at least from our perspective, right, as someone that's on these channels, that it's become a lot more privacy focused, and you can't see anywhere near the level of data that we used to. And there's still ways and hacks to probably figure it out. But I think like it's come a long way from 2016, 2017, 2018, when all these stuff started kind of changing. And, with EU, it's like they're just stifling everything to the point where no one can really do anything. So it's like they're just going to be stuck. So.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how much economic pain they want to endure.
Yeah.
As like, we and pretty much just America continues to be really the leader in a lot of things. China obviously isn't going to be taking over anytime soon. So in terms of another not at all contentious area is the notion of brand safety, which I personally think is like the most overblown thing in the world. We've kind of crossed the Rubicon here. Back in the days, I think of like, during broadcasts of like war in Iraq, there'd, be commercials which were of other things. And I think consumers understand the difference. But now we're seeing a resurgence of people losing their minds about, oh no, ads were placed next to certain thing. And I think there's like a notion in some people's heads of like this perfectly sanitized internet. Anyway, as someone who runs a lot of ads online, what are your thoughts? Is it overblown, underblown? You should pay attention, but don't kill yourself. Where do you net out on that question?
I net out on really not caring. Generally, honestly, at this point, if you're running ads on any major social platform, Meta, Google, any of those, like your ads are probably not going to appear in anything suggestive unless it's like a one-off instance. And the only areas where I go, I've seen issues with probably X with in ads in the comment sections where it's like your ads above or below something where you're like, but at the same time, it's context. You're like, well, I don't know if you remember, there's that famous, I think it's a commercial about first responders, and it literally aired like 1 minute before one of the planes hit the World Trade Towers. And it was like
such bad luck.
How bad, like, it's like you can't predict some of this stuff. And, it's also like, hey, a major earthquake hit, I don't know, Chile, and 100,000 people died. Next up, our sponsors. And it's like, yeah, you're running a commercial on the news. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? And so I think like it is partially just what we deal with. But like in terms of like, are your ads going to appear in front of like pornographic material or suggestive content around like, shootings or things like that? Like, I don't think it happens so much that you have to worry about it. And having like brand safety feels to me like in the days of the internet just feels a little bit off, because it feels like we as a culture are also moving away from everything having to be so protected. And yeah.
And I will say for X/Twitter, in the ad tool, they now have tiers of I'm okay with, it should only be on like dolphin safe tuna content. I'm okay with some of this, and then I'm okay with any content. And it has some details of each one. So the interesting thing is, if you're like a hyper capitalist brand, you're like, look, I don't care what I want people to see my company. You can run ads on like the sort of whole shebang of content for pretty discounted CPMs. So a friend of mine that I was talking to about this, who's not in the ad industry, and so he has none of the biases we do. He goes, because we were talking about ads on just like conservative versus liberal media sites, all this stuff. And he's like, but someone on Breitbart wants that Breitbart content. So when they see the ad there, they're like, oh, okay, I should, buy these paper towels. So he pointed out it's actually just people that are part of the other side of the trade, of their political belief, that then find it and use it as just a crudgel against that brand. Then it's just become a part of the culture war. So it's a really interesting argument from someone not in our sector who is like, but someone on that site likes that content. So.
I know. I've never understood the political side of it, as in like, hey, like your ad appeared on a Breitbart or Mother Jones or anything. I'm like, who cares? Like we've become so like fragile in that. And that one I've never understood, the political stuff. I'm like, I mean, hey, if my ads are going to appear on Daily Wire and like people are going to look at it, or my ads appear on MSNBC or whatever, like, I don't care. Like my ad, I'm selling shoes, or I'm selling a phone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that part is where I'm like, I just never understood that, because we will get, I mean, some of the brands that I work with, we will get that. Like, we'll get people that will screenshot our ads on connected TV that appear on Fox News. And they'll email and be like, I'm not buying because you're appearing on this channel. And you're like, what? Like, that's like, you get kind of confused. So
I was only watching this channel to get directions on how to turn off this channel.
So stupid.
Since we work, our platform is out of home ads. So, I don't have to deal with any of this. So I actually I should be running with the torch of brand safety and being like, you know what? The whole internet is unsafe and just use out of home ads. But it's such a disingenuous argument that, we don't even tend to do anything like that. But let's talk about out of home for a minute, because I like to say, our team likes to say that out of home ads are the best organic social media ads, insofar as people walk around with phones. If there's a piece of creative they see in New York, or, taking a road trip, they'll take photos of the fun ads and they'll share them online. We monitor and see it every day. Do you have any thoughts on if you guys even do any of this, and how to best integrate, I guess, your social ads with, I guess, not even just your out of home ads, but other forms of offline media?
Yeah. I work with a brand that does a lot of out of home. And the way that we seem to really kind of play it off is it is an extension. So we'll do specific markets for those ads, right? So if it's we're doing a drop, we'll do specifically 3 or 4 markets where we'll just hyper target that market with, the right ads, and all the ads will feel the same, right? So it'll be an extension of what they're already seeing online. It'll just be a little bit more of a, just slightly more up funnel offline. And you'll just measure it that way. So that's kind of how we've typically done it. And we're running local linear TV commercials, all the local stuff, radio and everything. But the out of home is routinely the ones that get the most engagement. And case in point, I work with a brand that people in that market knew that I worked in that brand, and I was getting texts left and right from friends that were there hey, I saw your ad inside of a bus. That's so cool. And it's it's something different when it's normally you're used to seeing I live in Los Angeles, right? So every bus here is lawyer ads on the side of buses, right? It's just lawyer ads or movies. There's nothing else. It's lawyer ads or movies. So when you see something that's different, it does catch your eye, and you're oh, what's I remember, what's the Oatly? Oatly is the name of the brand, right? When they ran their commercials or their out of home, people really liked those ads. They were popping up everywhere, and they were just unique. And I think that it is such a different way of doing things, where you should though match the online and offline, and make it super cohesive if it's an extension of the ad, or if it's the start of the ad. So if they're Googling it, they will start getting hit up with ads that are all feeling similar, but in the same vein. That could be anything from a tagline to any of that. That's typically how I've seen it work.
Awesome. I love that answer. And not even just internet ads. When I first moved into my new house here, speaking of targeting, I was getting CTV ads for a company that clears land that I ultimately used for some of our land. And it was from I'd never bought something from a TV ad until that point, but their targeting was so good, because we're not in a large area, but it's all new builds. It's a new, newly built out area of Texas. So they're so smart to run ads in this specific market. And a thing that we do is our product runs, we run geofence tests. So you can see if there's brand uplift if you were running out of home in just the Seattle area as one market. And the other really interesting thing is you can use your ads that work really well offline, online, and sometimes the other way, but it's all really good data. Why would you not keep running the high engagement ads or the ads that people texted your brand? Mm-hmm. So
that's the incrementality is something that it's absolutely crucial to do for people to start building trust, right? At least on the direct consumer side, it seems that people are very nervous about jumping into things that aren't meta, because you can't track one for one. And I tell every brand that I've been working with, especially as we head into Q4, I think this is going to be one of the most insane times to be running ads this Q4 more than any others, because of the doubling down of election spends. But then you have the Temus and the Sheins of the world that are also spending heavily. You have to find other ways to get in front of those people. And if you can just use Meta as a retargeting platform in that time frame, you'll be better off in using, out of home or any of these other stuff as top of funnel, just to drive a net new user that is seeing you somewhere else that isn't loaded with ads. So I'm right there with you. I think that's
So one other area to talk about that sort of rounds out, I guess, a few of the parts of discussion we've had. We've talked about online ads, offline ads. Do you have any thoughts on influencer marketing? Do you think it's a bubble? Do you think it's super effective, done well? What's been on your mind regarding influencers?
When it comes to influencers, I think there's two sides to it, right? There's the Instagram story tagging type influencer, and then there's the actual doing campaigns and playing in that world. My 2 cents on this is, if you want to build your brand, invest in the right YouTube creators that are speaking to your audience, and buy their sponsorship and play into that world, and measure it not based on day over day, but measure it like month over month, and look at it from a different perspective versus an Instagram, some Instagram model that's going to tag your post on stories, where it's swipe up to buy. Like, yeah, you'll get sales and it'll be good, but I've routinely found the best ROI is buying sponsorship on YouTube and really investing into that. But you need the element of that is often missed is people don't do their due diligence on the audience structure and how your audience plays into that. So looking at your YouTube studio, invest in YouTube as a channel, invest in YouTube Shorts as a channel organically, start to get an understanding of how engaged your audience is and how your audience is being made up. Then go and find those creators and sponsors based off those audiences that are living on YouTube. And the same goes for Instagram. But sometimes what will happen is, oh, well, I'm a headphone brand, and I'm running ads on I sell noise canceling headphones, but I'm running ads for whatever. You know what I mean? But it's like, it seems like there's always a disconnect because people just look at numbers and vanity metrics as the core. And oftentimes that's the worst thing to look at. I actually use a tool, Modash. Have you heard of Modash?
I haven't.
Yeah, it's a great tool because it helps. Like, I always look at all the brands that we ever work with. I'll look at something like a tool like that. There's other tools out there that do similar, where it's like you type in your handle, it says who's the biggest names that follow you, what do they follow, what's the word bubbles like, and digging into that and utilizing that data and going like, okay, this is the type of cohort that follows us, so let's go and find their channels that are the places to go, versus just looking at basic, hey, let's go advertise on that person because they got 12 million followers. It's like, okay, so.
Yeah, a lot of marketers are still kind of playing by a very dated playbook of just large numbers, and they don't really get what it means. And I think a few companies that are really paying attention are doing so well online that it's almost a joke. Like AG1 sponsoring a bunch of podcasts, like Surfshark sponsoring YouTube videos. Like, I can say these brands off the top of my head, and then like half of the S&P, like I've never even seen or heard online on any of the channels that I actually listen to of products I would buy from, because they just don't know to do that. It's like not really thought out part of their process. But then they'll go and sponsor some athlete that, I don't even care about. I'm not really a sports guy. But it's just really interesting because there's such a divide in your answer, and then also like what a lot of large brands do.
Yeah, because I think everyone, especially the bigger the brand you work for, the more disconnected from reality they are.
Totally. Oh my God.
And CMOs of these bigger corporate companies, they spend, I mean, it's not a knock on them. It's unfortunate. They spend more time having just to be in board meetings and appease people with vanity metrics. I worked with a Fortune 500 brand a few years ago, and like 11 o'clock at night, the last like the day before the end of the month, I get a message from them saying like, hey, we're like $280,000 short of this month's budget that we didn't realize that we had. Can you guys take that on social and burn it? And we're like, what? Like, I just think to me, that's like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, if we, like, why? Well, if we don't spend it, we won't get it next month. And you're like, where do you put that? You're like, okay, let's go put it on Audience Network because it will blow the quickest, you know? And so, but that's like, I feel like that's the industry for these corporate companies, that it's just very much like so much ad waste.
Yeah. Well, I suddenly accept sponsorships for posts online for any of your S&P companies that have $250,000 to burn. So
You got it.
well, David, this has been an awesome discussion.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on a bunch of stuff going on right now. Where can people connect with you and also your company online? Let us know.
Yeah, I have literally Twitter, and that's it. You won't find me on a website. It's just Herrmann Digital, HERRMANN, 2 R's, 2 N's, digital, on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, we will throw a link to your Twitter profile, and I'll include or exclude your LinkedIn if you don't want to be pestered there,
Sure.
but we'll put that in the description
Cool.
too. David, thank you for your time today. And for listeners who are watching on YouTube, I'm still doing the YouTuber thing. Please like, comment, or subscribe. We will speak to you all next week.